think this is kind of a good maybe segue to the recent news where
Oh,
the next generation of large language models will be agentic in nature. And that's kind of my scribbles are about, right? Like um I think the news was that there is the next generation of the enhancement of the large language model from, let's say, OpenAI
okay,
is going to be a system that is going to be maybe $2,000 a month for an enterprise client.
okay.
And I think the rationale that was given, I don't know if this is a correct quote, but apparently, well, if somebody retires, right, you can create an agent that is going to take over the function of that person. So, so there's, that's a big topic, but at some point they are already envisioning that agency with maybe a stronger model than GPT 4.0 being in a conversation to actually replace a person.
I think about almost little else, but how? So, having worked with SMEs, remember my
Mm,
perspective is always this weird in between a user who should or shouldn't know that much, right? They
mm,
should not be necessarily experts in anything, which is a great model for anyone using AI because you're using it because you lack some expertise in something, right? Like
mm,
you're looking beyond a Google, which is another puzzle because we've had Google to answer questions. But then we have the skill building thing. So one big skill about working in any company, I just realized, is that company. Like, how does this
mm,
company work? Right? It has little or nothing to do with what that
mm,
company produces, but every company works in some
mm,
unusual manner. And part of the people who've been around are either liked enough or they've been around long enough to understand the company itself.
mm. Yeah.
Now, could an agent understand the company it works in? I'm sort of like, that's where my head started to hurt. Does that does that make any sense to you? Because we
Oh
aren't,
yeah.
right, like, but we can say you're an expert in artificial intelligence, but you working in different functions in different companies, they'd be wholly different no matter what your expertise, because you'd have to learn how to apply your skills in that company, which is hard.
Well, so apparently, that's for sure, right?
Yeah.
That there's no question about that. But well, but they are saying that, hey, there is a solution, right? So there is your
Okay.
job
Oh
description,
yeah.
right? There is a job description, and in a corporate world, that is maybe a kind of a lot more holy than maybe in smaller organizations, right? So, and this is
Okay.
clearly a product that is meant to go to big players. So there is a job description that defines the tasks.
Mm.
And there is a data set that probably can be extracted. That basically, hey, the emails that you sent, the conversations, the transcripts, so perhaps there is enough to kind of get the agent going with a very strong large language model as an engine and kind of solve this through an agentic process, which is basically
Hmm.
uh, maybe shifting the focus from the large language model and question answering to something else, to specialized tools. And maybe that specialized tool is going to be an email writer that is responding to emails, right? Or
It's so good we talk because I've made a long list of notes, and one thing is why isn't there something that reads all my emails and tells me what I should do in the morning in order to deal with all my emails? Because
exactly,
I will
yeah,
say, let's do a quick poll, just a quick poll,
yeah.
and this is not to put you on the spot, but it is a
Uh-huh.
little. Um, your inbox, how many unread messages are there?
Well, I probably zero. I kind of
Okay,
like to
okay. All
keep
right,
my
I'm zero
teams.
too. I'm a zero inbox person, but I think we're
Yeah,
rare.
yeah. Oh, really? Oh, okay.
No, I honestly think we are because, well, just of anecdotal evidence. I mean, I found that most people have a work and private. You see what I mean? They usually have
Mm,
several emails. Almost, we know the volume of emails and its
mm,
purpose is nefarious half the time. So
mm,
good and bad. And there's been a million ways to have VIP. They keep trying to train inboxes, but people
mm.
are, they're lazy and they don't like to train computers to do things. So
Yeah.
I just think it's probably more likely somehow. And also in my old company, emails were used to talk about work. which is always surprising since why
Mhm.
do we have all these meetings? Is it to discuss the emails or, I never could really tell. Often they're also digests of the meetings, which kind of become similar to another meeting.
Well, but it's also storage, right? So it's document storage, right? People were emailing documents to themselves because somehow it's a little easier maybe to find it there comparing to a large directory structure, right? So yeah.
Well, and another anecdotal on that point, this morning I received an email from a fairly obviously incorrect, or not incorrect, but not a real email, Gmail account, right? Because I looked at what the actual account was. And it was my name, my birth date, I don't think it had my social security, but it had my address and it had some other facts about me and a PDF with my name on it. So I
Mm.
thought that's a pretty sophisticated phishing attempt, right?
Mm. Oh yeah, very good.
Uh, and having been part of a company where neither of us are advocating any like the people are the problem, right? It's more like what people do, what their roles are the problem, right? And we know that once you become a SME, once you become an expert in a company, your
Mm.
productivity is almost all put toward helping others cope, not getting ahead, but usually just cope, right? Because at least that's the multinational company that I worked for
Yeah,
was
yeah.
their role, right? And they were always complaining because they were answering the same questions over and over. So definitely a spot that we both feel strongly about for some disintermediation. But at the same time, they're invited to constant meetings. You see what I mean? Like their whole role is kind of solidified it and then being a stakeholder. That's another fun role, right? Like they're
Yeah, yeah.
where an LLM can't be a stakeholder.
Well, it maybe not, but we are talking right now about those messaging processes that are basically meta information. So we are kind of explaining things, maybe we are clarifying things, maybe we are giving each other moral support, and kind of like at the end of the day, this is maybe not pure productivity, but this could be supporting productivity. So if I have to do something, if I need to design a widget, that body of information could be helpful. So if my role is maybe to write a legal argument or to produce a document that is going to have value for the organization, right? Then that is something that a large language model can handle, right?
Mm-hmm. But
So yeah, so
does it need to know about the world of this company though? I always thought the kind of the magic of large language models is that there's so much out there already, right? That you're actually not looking for it to be trained on your own process, not necessarily your own processes, but your own way of doing something, right?
yeah, and I think yes, I think there is a culture, there is a company culture that is a factor, definitely. So even if there is an external regulation, then that regulation probably gets applied in a particular way within the organization, and that kind of can percolate to engineering, to legal, to HR, to all these places. So I would say yes. But the problem is obviously bigger, right? We may agree or disagree on the little details here, but then there was this paper that I think you sent me, or maybe I forwarded to you. I don't remember, probably last week, about basically the paper was saying, hey, what's the optimal number of employees in an organization, right?
Oh yes,
And
yeah, it was
and
you.
that number is zero. and
Yeah.
and and with the announcement from OpenAI like this, it kind of, feels like, hey, they are going in that direction.
Well, and it's interesting because I agree with you, and I have a lot of love for helping large organizations become leaner. I guess that's a big theme in my world of UX, right? It's called lean, and I don't know that lean, it is probably in every discipline, is it not? It's the idea of rapid
Mm.
experimentation and less,
Mhm, mhm,
and I think Scrum and some of the more uh, maybe they're all ingrained now, which is less documentation, more work. See, like all those trends were really to I think deal with the frustration and the power available to individuals, right? Like you just got more powerful, and you were finding most of your time being taken up with things that weren't as productive or weren't why you were good or what you were doing, right? You're like, hey, I have to fill out TPS reports instead of coding, you know, and lean and all these other things were meant to say, no, that's a waste. You know, you should be more personally involved. And I think you and I have spoken before, and I'm not going to quote the article about all the startups that have come along to do your tax work, maybe do inventorying or stock and supply, basically all the kind of business functions that you normally need to hire a person for came in, and Salesforce, right? You know, you don't need to have mountains of temp workers to keep track of everything. You just get people to type it themselves. It's probably when we first met, right? I'm not going to type your syllabus into the system for you. You're going to type it in. And no, you're not going to just give me a PDF. Like you have to be deconstructed into data, which might be a topic for later, right? Making them do what people do on Instagram. Like you don't get to just throw something at it and say, here you go, here's my Instagram post. It's like you follow a series of cleaning instructions so that the database is usable by this company. No company I've ever worked for has ever had that, right? It's a PDF with an email that's always idiosyncratic. It's very idiosyncratic. Of course, there's 5 or 6 replies attached, which I never can tell, right? Unless you're in trouble that someone else had a conversation that got forwarded to you. So we're used to this, right? We're used to this very noisy world. Now you're saying, hey, we don't need people. And I'm like, I think your whole job is to deal with noise. I don't think your expertise may not be what we can, because if we took away your noise filter, I would assume that LLMs love to churn no matter if it's all noisy. They don't refuse to answer your question, right? They don't say like, that's not important. Leave me alone.
well, yeah, but there could be something in the noise, right? So I think
I think the world is in the noise. The noise is the world, right?
So it might well be that somebody is a better programmer and they are listening to heavy metal music, right?
Sure.
And somebody might be a better, I don't know, lawyer if they can chat, or exchange memos with colleagues, right? And chat about baseball kind of in between, so that they kind of get their left hemisphere, right hemisphere to kind of get whatever works for the particular area, kind of a little bit of a rest, a little bit of an engagement, right? So I would say that if we define now the agency now around that, and maybe including the noise, but the example that you have with PDFs or maybe doing something, right? If the agent now has knowledge about all these APIs that exist, and one of those APIs could be, a machine design, right? So it's going to enable you to put together a sequence of gears, and that's going to be a transmission for a car, right? So if you can have an agent that is going to do that for you, then you have you're solving engineering problems through an intelligent interaction between the agent, LLM, and the technical API that puts together gears into a transmission. And you're just giving it, the size of the transmission. It should be a shoebox size and have 9 gears. And the knowledge that already exists and the examples, the multi-shot, enable you to kind of produce something new. And the same we can translate to the legal world, to the analytics world, to the financial world. So yes, I would say that now, what's different, right? So what's different between, let's say, this announcement from OpenAI that, we're going to have agents and those agents will be $2,000 a pop, comparing to, let's say, what we had maybe a month ago,
Hmm.
where we had basically just direct conversation with a large language model.
Hmm.
And maybe there was some sort of a vectorized embedding system that is giving you context, right? So it's basically a significant addition because with RAG you had those embeddings, those vectors that give you context, but now you have additional knowledge that the agent has about those applications, right? So you can now specialize, you can chunk the knowledge into smaller pieces and create a plan how to execute that within the space of the solutions defined by the APIs. So you see, I mean, so before we had like a novel or email writing system, and
Hmm.
now we have something that can be hyper specialized to kind of get into whatever the API is available and reason about the API or reason about the database or reason about investment strategy, right?
Okay. So if I go
So
to somebody and they say, basically this is just a problem, which is another topic, right? But let's just have a problem and I go to somebody and they're like, I'm a CPA and I can do your
mm,
taxes and I have 20 years experience and I passed the CPA exam. I wouldn't necessarily have any reason to doubt. However, I don't know anything about what they do. I just want them to handle this thing. And as far as I care, as long as it's handled, I have, right. It's,
mm,
we were kind of mentioning regulatory, which is not untrue. There's a lot of regulatory stuff in many businesses.
mm,
Getting the paperwork in on time, lawyering perhaps is just getting the paperwork done, you know,
mm,
a lot of it. And if you're saying, of course, that this could be done by this, I don't know if it's specialized agent. I want to ask a question about that, but don't let me forget because that was an interesting part. Um, and it's cheaper, whatever this person would charge this autonomous thing, and I don't care about the outcome. Remember, I just need this thing to be done, and it says done.
mm,
Okay. Now, and as far as a use case goes, then really you're just competing on cost, right? I mean, that's kind of it, because I don't
yeah,
ask for it to have passed the CPA or have 20 years experience, right? Like I don't have any way of
yeah.
knowing. And we could talk about that too, because boy, are there a lot of models out there. Like it's almost like a Miss Universe pageant with all the models sort of fighting it out. Like, and I'm like, but what the hell's a model anyway, right?
Mm.
But
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like I said, that sort of also takes away a little bit of our ability to decide, right? Because I think we find it hard to decide when cost is no object, or there is no scarcity, or all the human factors that make us work as humans, right? That we don't necessarily go out and just trust anything without, having some due diligence, even though much of that is false and probably not helpful. Does any of that make sense? I just wonder, like the human adoption to me is always the biggest
Mm,
puzzle of it, right? AI is great, but humans are not easily changed, and they
mm,
don't they don't want to. Most of all. Now, if there's an economic model involved, then I think that makes it even more troubling to many, because we all know economic models tend not to favor us. you know,
mm.
maybe they do, but they always seem to favor, sometimes some pretty unsavory things. Let's just put it that way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, that was a lot to unpack.
Mm,
Did any of that, you know what I mean, is we focus here that this is a solution, but I keep thinking, is it a solution to a problem that we have, right? Do we have this problem that my accountant is too expensive? Maybe. I actually had a really reasonable accountant, but couldn't care what he did, and I paid him his money, and he put in my forms. You see what I mean? And
mm,
all was well with the world, right? And I didn't have any more detailed need than that. Now, if I'm your online CPA, I'll do that for you.
mm,
I'm always interested in trying such things. But again, I just wonder, do you have an anecdote? Is there something that you would easily offload? Doctoring's probably a terrific example, right? Like, do we really know and trust our physicians? Like, we know they're, yeah, but if AI says, oh, that mole should be removed,
Hmm.
okay, good deal, right? I mean, can you do it yourself, AI? No, no, I don't do things, but go tell somebody, have this looked at immediately, right?
Hmm.
Those sort of things are interesting. And I'm sorry, that was a lot to unpack, Jack. I didn't.
Yeah, I understand. Well, so yeah, I don't think I can answer most of those problems like about trust.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
is
that's
is the
why we're a
is
team.
there yeah, is there a data set that I can use for training an artificial intelligence accountant that will entail the knowledge that this accountant might have, that is
Mhm.
not codified, that is kind of anecdotal, and that is experiential, right? I mean, there is a lot of stuff like that that is, kind of out there, and the question is that, hey, maybe that's the hardest part about AI, right? Kind of getting to that knowledge so that you can use it, right? And the same in the medical field. Like, I mean, hey, the doctor might be very highly incentivized to actually sell you a certain solution, right, to your problem, and that involves certain medication that maybe there is another way, right? But yeah, so all these things are kind of difficult to unpack. But one thing that is for certain is that the system development paradigm is going to change,
Mhm.
because now we are going to be much more interested in the conversation between the agent and the large language model in terms of how the problem solving might be running. So there's going to be a focus on, hey, so what's the planning process, right? How can I decompose the problem into pieces, knowing that I might have 20 APIs that are relevant, 50 APIs that are not relevant, but maybe if I change the problem in a certain way, then maybe I can use other APIs that I didn't think about. So
Hmm.
now this part of the programming process was something that was big in the AI circles like 20 years ago, when they were saying, hey, our goal is that in 20 years, the autonomous soccer playing team of robots will build the soccer world champions, right? And,
Okay.
and, and so that was a multi-agent system, right? And now today we have a system that kind of, okay, so now it works, right? So let's kind of do something with it, right? So I think that the paradigm finally, if we undust the AI books from 20 years ago, that's kind of like really interesting, because we have the APIs and we have a new model of thinking where the LLM is clearly just an engine, and then the knowledge and the algorithms, the logic, the planning, the expert system stuff that everybody was kind of dealing with, a long time ago. Now it's really doable.
Hmm.
So what do we do with that?
No, and I always saw that as probably being, it's like science fiction, right? You can only imagine the things that you think are understandable by the people you're writing for, right? Like, we don't
Yeah.
understand things, but the idea that there would be probably two things, and maybe you can correct me on this. For one, I think that the computational ability is much more than we could have ever imagined, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can do matrix multiplication, which kind of led to all this. And then secondly, you were talking about, or at least I seem to recall that part of the goal was that everybody was in their own world, right? They would have a set of knowledge about, plant biology, and then somebody else would have something about car manufacturing, whatever. And it
Hmm.
was merging of them, that they were both solving the same problem, that I thought led to the whole concept of this generative AI, right? That it didn't need to have specialization, or did I get that wrong?
Yeah, yeah. So exactly right. So up until this point, a large language model, if you ask it how much is 6 times 6,
Mm-hmm.
the only answer it could provide was an answer from an example. If it had an example
Okay. Yep. Yep.
in the sufficient volumes, right, then
Right.
it's going to tell you, okay, so it's
Sure.
36, right? But if it didn't, then it would feel like, hey, I really have to answer the question, and it would kind of give you a hallucination. But now you have those libraries. So first you're going to ask, hey, can I do a computation to do that? Right. So
Hmm.
if you have a problem solving, if you have like an organizational problem within an enterprise, maybe you will have an agent that is going to called Peter Drucker, and it will have organizational behavior knowledge, and it will kind of give you a recipe to do what to do here, right? Because somebody was supposed to send me an email, but they didn't. How do I approach the problem, right?
Right.
So yeah, so I think that this is now a different paradigm.
Well, and it certainly it makes sense to sort of the idea of gathering together and then spreading apart. Also, I believe there's maybe a little bit of pressure on people about the energy usage. Is that that's real, isn't it? That even though we have this ability, it's extremely energy inefficient to do these sort of brute, well, not brute force, but just these large, general intelligence things. So, as an example, they're building in France a fusion reactor,
Mm,
and this massive project, right? And it's this dream of everyone is somehow to get this and out. And I was very impressed watching this process. Yet, of course, the thing was is that the if it worked, it still wouldn't be that great,
yes.
right? Because the
Mm,
infrastructure needed to get more than you put into it is so massive that the amortization, I can't even imagine, right? It probably would
mm,
never pay itself off, but it certainly isn't solving any real world human problem, and
mm.
it probably never will. But we like these big, insane, like, what do they always keep talking about, general intelligence or whatever, like, well, you could probably do it, but you'd have to build that insane machine to do it.
Mhm.
And this insane machine, while at least is not as bad as fusion, you can't like take this energy and push it over to America or something, right? Like
Mm,
at least you could probably spend a little bit of computational time with this. But these supercomputers have been around forever, and they've always been this just sort of shiny object, you know? Whereas, like you're just saying, no, the practicality is probably to, and maybe that's what's happening. It's more practical to just invest in a mathematical model for XYZ ranges of computation, right? And make
yeah.
that a service, software as a
Mm,
service, right? Like here's a service that might be needed in a general question
yeah.
about,
Yeah.
right? So I love the practical that we're going back to being practical, but I still feel as though the imagination is that we're still working on this shiny object thing, right? Because Apple still hasn't released its AI model. And when it does, I'm going to predict it's going to be okay. You know what I mean?
Mm,
No one's lives are going to be changed by having better written emails. Sorry. I don't see it.
mm,
Perhaps lives will be changed if you fire people who are SMEs,
mhm,
highly paid, with
mhm.
distinct institutional knowledge and distinct knowledge of how their chosen field applies to this place. You see what I mean? Like
Mm,
they're the fit. They're the fit here. And if you go to employee zero, I would just say there's still one employee, right? There's still the person, the sole proprietor, but
mm,
they're trying to sell to customers by themselves and augment themselves, like I
yeah.
would with a warehousing or you know what I mean, with all the connections you would need depending upon your business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well, there's certainly pressure, right, in a lot of areas, and I think there is also pressure in engineering, right? Like, hey,
Mm.
well, let's create like the NASA's plan, right? Let's create a 10x engineer that can be 10 times more productive, right, or 10 times more innovative, or however they want to call it, right? So that can mean a lot of different things, and um, but on the other hand, well, if that's really happening, then perhaps the next thermonuclear reactor is not going to be a government project, right? That is going to be $50 billion of a budget and never finished. Maybe it's going to be a few guys in a warehouse that are going to be equipped with the generative tools, that will come up with an alternate solution that is going to be kind of like what SpaceX did, right? SpaceX came up in a small team with rocket reusability, and NASA, right, over how many decades they couldn't do that, right? Because they had a different attitude. So yeah, but they had very good engineers, no question about it, right? So yeah, so all this, maybe those avenues will be opening, and maybe within the enterprise, maybe there is similar synergies or similar effects that will happen, right? Like um, yeah, maybe there's this email writing problem that we are having that is manifested in so many different ways, um, is going to be solved, and then something maybe else will emerge. Like for example, for me, uh, I'm kind of interacting with a large language model to solve my problems, uh, kind of in stages, right? So I have a first stage in which I'm kind of formulating my general problem, and then I'm asking the AI, hey, so find the problems that I omitted or holes in my reasoning. So it's
100%.
kind of expanding on my stuff, and then I'm looking at that, and then I'm feeding that to another large language model that is maybe kind of, hey, so now convert that plan into something that is machine readable. And so now I have another stage that is that, right? And then after a few steps like that, I got, a final outcome that could be a piece of code, or it could be an edited document, or an email. So,
Yeah.
so who knows?
No, but you do the thing that I think I've heard most often, right? With the daily users of AI, it isn't necessarily to replace them. I would say one of the difficulties in my career is that we're designing for people other than ourselves, right? So we've invented all these fake ways to understand other people than ourselves, such
Mm,
as personas, or just some way of saying like, hey, and I was talking to someone the other night, and he was talking about sports betting and is it fantasy football and such, and I
mm,
was fascinated because I was like, you're like a person who thinks of very deeply about a thing that I've never thought about, right? But I might
mm,
have to be involved and maybe even give people like you my work. Like I might need to work for people that I have little or no understanding of. And I think that somehow my confidence comes from generative AI and able to give me a perspective about how they would take my idea
mm,
and how I could translate it to them. Almost literally like a translator, right? Like
mm,
I don't know how to speak Klingon, but I could
mm,
get this thing to do it, and then all the Klingon speaking people may now ignore me or pay attention to me or whatever they would do normally.
mm,
But
mm.
I'm not being blocked because
Yeah.
they just don't, they don't understand me and what I do, which is very, very common in design and probably not uncommon in coding, right? Because
Mm,
there are very few people that really can critically look at and understand a piece of code, and really they kind of look toward, well, did it work? Was it on time? They look at metadata.
mm,
And so the other day, apparently, there was a published paper talking about a unified theory. We always love unified, since we're talking about boondoggles, right? So here's a
mm,
unified theory, and it was being looked at by someone apparently very knowledgeable, but they're in there like critiquing the grammar, which is something I can't do with math, right? Like he's like, well, that's the wrong symbol to use, and wait, you're equating this to this. We've already discovered this, like
mm,
was really kind of tearing this thing apart, and was saying, well, at least I don't think AI wrote it, was one of the biggest things. It was like, it
mm,
seems like it's written, but it makes no sense. And
mm,
to me, I was fascinated only because I had no ability to understand what they were talking about. But I understood the translation problem, right? And the point is did these people really make a unified theory? They
mm,
got this thing published, which is always the, back to my accountant. I have a CPA, I have 20 years experience, right? I've been published, right? Is
mm,
something that says this is worthwhile, worth your time, and maybe not completely false. But my mind goes to uh, Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, that most decisions being made are not being made with full understanding, and almost all of them are a little bit better than 50-50.
mm.
I know, and he wrote this quite a while ago. So now it's like, well, if we understand that these roles are people are being done at a 50-50 success rate, that half the
Mm.
things they do work out and half they don't. I don't think it's that hard to say let's replace that with some autonomous agent,
Mm.
because the accuracy isn't their right, isn't their strong suit. Is the translation ability is their strong suit. They can make something understandable to you based on a very unique set of understandings, right? So
Yeah,
so
well,
since most people may not have spent that much time paying attention in engineering school, you might need to be reminded that this is a factor of 10, not a factor of 100, right? But the AI would have no problem with that mistake, that you
yeah.
would make easily,
Mm.
right? Like the difference between a million and a billion is about a billion. That's a one that humans make that mistake all the time, even
Mm.
though it's a very silly mistake. It's
Yeah.
just because we just don't conceive of things that way.
Mm.
So as
Yeah.
usual, a lot to unpack, but definitely everything you've said has been on my mind the last week, and maybe we haven't spoken in too long to unpack
Mm.
some of these things. But no, in terms of the goal right now is to get these ideas into to some form, a translation, so to
Yeah.
speak,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And that's where I wish I could be replaced in
Mm.
many ways. I've tried. It's really not that good at emotionally communicating, right? That's one real flaw, right? Bullet points to me are the least emotional of all
Mm.
writing, and somehow it's really prompted to do that. And I don't know, have you had that with code? Is it, or does it, is it like with me, you just don't care, you just run it, you're like, okay, that seems to be a reasonable output, right? Like, I don't really care that your syntax is poor
Mm.
or whatever, or do you look at it and say, God, that what a weird way to have handled that, and how did you misinterpret me so badly?
Mm.
It's something I experience a bit, right? So you're trying to tune the noise.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I always thought, and I mean no disrespect, I always thought that affective reasoning is one of the easier areas because,
Okay.
I mean, maybe we don't know exactly how, but there is ways to kind of evoke emotional responses,
Mm.
in very easy way. I mean,
Oh,
early gaming, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
A few pixels, Pac-Man, right? People felt attachment and still kind of dream about it sometimes, right? And so now if we translate this into kind of other means or other form factors, maybe there's a way uh, to kind of redesign PowerPoint, right? And redesign bulleted lists so that they resonate. And maybe everybody will have different ones. And maybe at the end of the day, it's going to be an avatar, which is an attractive person based on our preferences, that will be reciting those bullet points exactly the way they were. And we will never be more happy seeing those bullet points coming from that person, right? So, I mean, I don't know where this is going to go, but I mean, this is definitely something that should be tried.
Oh yeah, yeah. And that's both of our passions, right? Is to set up experiments so that you can
Mm.
learn. I think the thing is, you can, just like with lean, learning fast is always a good thing.
Mm.
However, most companies, the larger they get, more than zero, move much slower, right? They're
Mm.
more reliable because there's more redundancy, but they're not fast, and they never were designed to be fast. And it lends us maybe to the conclusion here could just be like, is this economically just going to favor people who are sort of sole proprietors, right? I have an
Mm.
idea, create something, and I want to do it, and now all the things that keep me from doing it, all my lack of skill, all my lack of this, are now much cheaper than they would ever be to get reasonable solutions. And the learning curve is also considerably lower because I can give you Adobe Creative Suite, but
Mm.
it is a massive learning curve as to how that produces your vision, right? Or whatever that may be. Or however you plan to use all these different ways of building your visionary business, right? Um, and unfortunately, it's still going to be, the idea of redundancies, which
Hmm.
isn't America, but it is that feeling of like, well, how many, how efficient can people be? What is um, I'm really puzzled as to what productivity even means, and I'm not the only one. I read a lot of people who are also like, it's a very weird word, because it seems to have positive connotations, being productive.
Hmm.
But jobs are not about productivity, they're about reliability. Work is about production, but it is not about reliability. So we have a lot of terms, that probably are used meaninglessly, and now we have new tools, as you mentioned, and
Hmm.
new capabilities. Well, right now, if everyone's fighting it out to be the model of the year, is that true, by the way? Am I wrong about this?
Well, there are rankings, right? So I think, if you are, 0.007% below another model, then you have to improve, right? Because you are not at the top of the list.
I got you. Okay, all right. So, well, that even is more meta than we can imagine, right? Because we all know that SMEs are overworked and they never seem to be able to take a break. So I don't
Hmm.
necessarily want to replace them, but it's that 0.07% part. They're just that much more, um, reliable than other methods, I guess,
Yeah,
right? Like they're just there. They're not going to go anywhere, and
yeah.
companies, new people to companies, everybody relies upon something like that.
But then, so what's going to be next, right? So the next, maybe our next conversation should be about the next step. So now OpenAI says, hey, I'm going to give you an agent that is going to send emails or write emails,
Mhm.
right? But then the next thing could be, hey, so now the recipient of the email will also be an agent. So do we even
Yeah,
need to send an email?
ideally it would be.
Right. And so there was this sci-fi novel that I forgot the title, but basically it was about those hyper intelligent large language models that started exchanging information, and nobody knew about it because that was kind of part of their hyper consciousness. They were just exchanging those vectors that there were absolutely not, you couldn't decipher them. It was just kind of part of their reasoning process, right? So I think we are going there, right? So the email between two large language models is terribly inefficient. Who needs to send an email if they can send maybe like a neural network kind of like image to another model, and then the other model will have a much more optimized kind of idea what needs to be done. So I think this is Blade Runner kind of showing up on at our doorstep, within 5 years.
100%. Yeah, that's what I mean. Is the time frame is there? Like it's really just more. How do you get a little bit of ahead of
Yeah.
the direction so that you're not going to need to do X, Y, Z. We keep saying we're both educators, right? So the idea is, what would you need to be educated in? And I think every day I read something new or get some new insight into just how pervasive it is. I mean, every student on earth must have figured this out by now. You know what I mean? But I don't think every educational institution has figured it out, since I
Mm.
actually giving a lecture right now by
Mm.
someone who wants to write a book about it. And you know what I mean? It's
Mm.
the same thing. The word travels slowly because we're the SMEs.
Yeah.
You know what I
And
mean?
and who is the book for, right? Maybe the primary audience will be the AI, because maybe that's going to be the only kind of data set that the AIs will see as a new piece of addition to the training data set. So yeah, I mean this is yeah.
I think it's in the prompts, but thankfully, whenever I ask a question, they say, "Wow, what an interesting and insightful question." So at least I get the
At
little bit.
least there's this. So exactly, yeah. It goes back to Pac-Man, right? That these 32 pixels were so cute. I'm gonna play the game for forever.
Exactly.
And yeah, yeah,
Always work. All right. Well, always great. We will cut and scene and regroup next week. Well done.
yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Cheers and edit and stuff. That was pretty good. Sorry. It's weird that whenever we talk, it's like, God, I'm so